class, I need to cancel our class again today because my entire family is sick, and so the only time I can really log on to my computer is after everyone is asleep. So please watch this in lieu of going to class tomorrow on 9/29. Let's go ahead and get started. Like we talked about on Tuesday, your homework for this week is to read and watch everything in this page, The American Dream, and also submit your week 5 discussion questions by Friday with the 2-day grace period. Now that you've watched The New American Dream by Courtney Martin, I want you to pause this video and write on a piece of paper or perhaps in a document, what do you think Courtney Martin's thesis is? And if you weren't sure what her thesis is, you're welcome to go back and review the video. Came up with something similar to this, you're correct. Courtney Martin thinks that the American dream should be redefined as community as opposed to material wealth. And what you can do with this thesis is figure out whether you agree or disagree. Do you think that the American dream and happiness should be more about material possessions, such as housing or perhaps the latest iPhone and things like that? Or do you think it should be more about how you connect with those around you? The opinions we are getting, you're now going to pause the video and watch this song by Chance the Rapper called First World Problems. If you don't know what first world problems are, they're usually things that people complain about, but they feel bad for complaining about them because they're somewhat silly, right, in the grand scheme of things. So maybe, for example, it takes us too long to do something, like get ice from the refrigerator. Or perhaps your latest computer isn't going as quickly as you would like. I don't know, little frustrations like that typically count as first world problems. And that is what Chance the Rapper talks about in his new song. So once you have watched that, you can also pull up the lyrics and we'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. So go ahead and pause the video here in order to listen to the song. If you're wondering where the song is, there is a link under the Zoom recording for this week. So I will update it to be under Zoom recordings -5. Lyrics to follow along with me. We're going to talk a little bit about close reading skills. And these are skills that can take you one step further when you're completing readings for this class or really for any other class. And it really is as easy as 1, 2, 3. The first step towards close reading on any level is first understanding. In order to make sense of an article or topic, you really just have to understand it on face value, right? What is this text or movie or picture or TikTok video about? So I want you to pause the video and brainstorm very quickly, maybe just in 30 seconds. What do you think the song, First World Problems, is literally about? Take some notes for yourself. With a similar list, then you're correct. Really what this song is about is the trapping of fame and the importance of family as opposed to success in the typical way that we would think of success. Chance the Rapper really sings and talks about how he has achieved his dream, but it really isn't what he thought it would be because it takes him away from his family, right? And it reminded me of the old saying, be careful what you wish for. You may get everything that you want, but it could come in a way that you never saw coming, right? Let's look at some of the lyrics that might be indicative of this understanding and how we interpreted the lyrics. Areas where you can see him really go into detail about missing his family and the trappings of fame are when he talks about missing his daughter on tour, right? Typically that's not something you would take a child on. And he says he's a rich excuse for a father, which I think is a really interesting interpretation rather than being, a poor excuse for something, which is typically how we would say this. He's a rich excuse for something. So even though he can materially provide for his daughter, he can't provide for her emotionally. And he says later on, I think my little cousins want their cousin back, right? He lied about coming back to them, as adults sometimes do to children, right? And perhaps that created a distance that he didn't see coming. Now that we understand the song on the most basic level and know what it's about, the next thing we want to do is notice. Notice any important things. This is going to vary depending on what type of text you're reading. If it is, for example, fiction or nonfiction, you're going to look for different things. Fiction are typically what people remember interpreting in high school. You want to look for symbols, metaphors, similes, rhyme, images, all of those poetic devices that you probably have learned about in other literature classes in the K through 12 system. Nonfiction, however, you want to look for different things such as argument, what quotes the author uses, and perhaps where their thesis statement is. Because these two really differ in purpose. Whereas fiction is sometimes meant to maybe amuse or delight or entertain in some way, nonfiction is typically meant to provide some sort of argument. This relates to a lot of the texts that we will be looking at in this class, right? Articles in newspapers, perhaps certain type of books, TED Talks, right? So on and so forth. They might entertain us, but mostly they're meant to get across some sort of message. I would qualify Chance the Rapper's song as something fiction because it's more of a work of art. So let's see if we can find some interesting things about his text that stand out to us in some way. When you're at the noticing stage, that's all you want to do, is notice something about the text that you find interesting. You don't have to do anything with what you notice yet. You just simply have to notice it. That stood out to me, and I don't know why yet, is the very last line of the chorus, "The American dream, may you never wake up." And the reason this stands out to me is because I think it's like a really dark image, and for some reason that intrigues me. Again, when I'm noticing something about the text, I don't have to explain it yet. I just simply have to notice it. I have guessed where we were going with this. Step number 2, when we closely read a text, is explaining. Now that we have noticed a couple of interesting things about the poem or the lyrics, right? Lyrics are essentially a poem. Why are they interesting to us? How do they comment on the text as a whole? Or why is it important? And there's any number of explanations that would be relevant for this. How you interpret a line is going to be individual to you. Let's try and interpret the one that I noticed. The reason this stands out to me is because it interprets the American dream literally as something that happens maybe when you're awake. And I think the reason it interests me is because this is a person who has achieved the quote-unquote American dream as a successful rapper who's achieved fame. And he's still not satisfied with it. So it's interesting that he picks this really dark image to talk about the American dream. And he's almost saying, in some ways, it's caused a death. Probably a death of who he used to be before he was famous. So that really is a reason that I find that line interesting, and I think it's pretty compelling. What you to do now is pause the video and follow along. Find a line or a set of lines that you think are interesting for some reason, and then attempt to explain why are they interesting, what do you notice about the line, and why do you think it's important. Go ahead and pause the video here. Hopefully you were able to practice your close reading skills by finding a line or lines and what you think is interesting about them. The third step in this process is not just to explain what you think is interesting about a line or a quote, but also to synthesize it. And what that word means is to connect it to other sources. This is something you'll do in your essay for this class, whether it's the midterm, whether it's essay 3, or whether it's essay 4. It's not just enough to notice a line that's interesting, you also have to embed it in your body paragraphs and explain it, but also explain how it connects to your topic or other sources. So let's practice doing this now, along with the line you chose, but I'm going to work on mine. The American dream, may you never wake up. I'm going to find something about Courtney Martin or Brandon King, perhaps if you want, to connect to the specific line, something that I think adds to the conversation it's creating in some way. I'm going to pull up the transcript and try and find a good part that connects to it. Just a couple minutes in, I think I found something. She says, all right, so we're not finding steady employment, we're not earning as much money, and we're not living in big fancy houses. Toll the funeral bells for everything that made America great. This connects directly to Chance the Rapper because it has that same dark imagery. Toll the funeral bell is an image of death. So I think that's interesting that they both convey in their separate texts that the American dream is dead to some degree, but perhaps as we have defined it is dead, right? So it's not necessarily that it doesn't exist, but the way we have defined it needs to change. And I think that would be true for Courtney Martin's TED Talk if you did watch it. Made that connection by just simply using my critical thinking skills, I should write a little bit about it, explaining it. Just a quick explanation where I put those two ideas together. Both Martin and Chance the Rapper think the American dream should be redefined, and as it exists, the American dream is dead. Martin states, blah, blah, blah. Chance the Rapper states, blah, blah, blah. And you can see once you begin to connect two sources, it begins to sound a lot like a body paragraph and a lot like an explanation that you would include in your essays. So this sort of deep thinking and connection is really what we should be seeing in our body paragraphs. And a lot of it begins not when you write, right? Not when you sit down and open your Word document, but when you begin to read. Okay, and that's why these close reading skills are so important. Then pause the video and do one last practice. Go ahead and pull up either Courtney Martin's TED Talk or Brandon King, The American Dream, Dead, Alive, or On Hold article, and look for a section that connects with the part that you found interesting in the song. And then briefly, either on a piece of paper or just in your head, try to connect them and explain why. Hopefully you had a bit of time to do some writing about the text. Thank you for watching this video. We're going to review these concepts really briefly on Tuesday. Don't forget to turn in your discussion questions and let me know if you have any questions. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. See you on Tuesday.